The moment my wife stepped out of our house with her legally owned firearm secured at her side, the HOA Karen across the street completely lost it. She started screaming about danger, dialing 911 like she'd uncovered a terrorist plot. 42 seconds later, police cruisers rolled in fast, and that's when everything flipped. Because instead of backing her up, the officers recognized exactly who my wife was, and did something that made the HOA Karen go dead silent. The shouting started before my wife even reached the end of the driveway. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the neighborhood feels frozen in time, lawns freshly cut, flags hanging limp, not a car moving anywhere. My wife stepped outside to lock up before heading to the range, her firearm holstered properly at her hip, completely legal, completely visible, exactly how she'd been trained to carry it. She hadn't said a word to anyone. She wasn't posturing. She wasn't angry. She was just existing. That was apparently enough. Hey, you can't have that out here. The voice came from across the street. Sharp, panicked, the unmistakable pitch of someone who believed they were the main character in everyone else's life. It was the HOA president, middle-aged, overdressed for a suburban block, phone already in her hand. She marched toward the curb like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. My wife stopped, calm as stone. "Ma'am, I'm on my property." "That doesn't matter," the woman shrieked. "This is a family neighborhood. You're threatening people." "Threatening who?" There wasn't a soul outside except the two of them, and me, watching from the porch, already feeling that familiar tightening in my chest. We'd had issues with this woman before. Parking complaints, trash cans, the color of our fence, every petty power grab imaginable. But this was different. She dialed 911 with shaking hands, narrating the situation like she was reporting an active shooter. "There's a woman with a gun," she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "She just walked outside with it like she owns the place. I feel unsafe. Yes, send police immediately." My wife didn't argue, didn't reach for anything. She slowly placed her range bag on the ground and rested her hands in plain sight, posture relaxed, non-threatening. Years of training showed in every movement. I stepped closer. "She's doing nothing wrong," I said. "She's legally armed." The HOA president snapped her head toward me. "Stay out of this. You people always think rules don't apply to you. You people." That was when I knew this call wasn't about safety. It was about control. The sirens came fast, too fast. 42 seconds later we'd find out. Two cruisers screeched to a stop at the end of the block, doors flying open. Officers moved with purpose, hands near their belts, eyes scanning. The HOA president's face lit up with vindication. She practically ran toward them. "That's her," she shouted, pointing dramatically. "She's armed. I told her to put it away and she refused." The officer's eyes went to my wife. And then everything changed. One of them slowed, squinted, took a step closer. His entire posture shifted, tension draining from his shoulders. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "can you turn slightly to your left?" My wife complied. That's when they saw it. The badge. Not a toy. Not decorative. Official. The officer straightened instantly. His partner did the same. Without a word exchanged between them, both raised their hands in a crisp, unmistakable salute. "Afternoon, Sergeant," one said. The street went silent. The HOA president froze mid-stride, mouth open, phone still pressed to her ear. What are you doing?" she demanded. "She's the threat." My wife nodded politely. "Off duty. On my way to the range." "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied. "Apologies for the disturbance." The color drained from the HOA president's face. "Wait, she can't. Why does she have a badge?" I couldn't help myself. "Because she earned it." The officer turned to the HOA president. "Ma'am, did she threaten you?" "Well, no, but..." "Did she point the firearm at anyone?" "No, but..." "Did she leave her property or behave aggressively?" "She scared me." The officer sighed. Being scared doesn't mean someone broke the law. The second officer asked for my wife's credentials, which she provided calmly. Everything checked out within seconds. Then the tone shifted again. Ma'am, the first officer said to the HOA president, misuse of emergency services is a serious matter. What? She snapped. I was protecting the neighborhood. You reported an active threat that did not exist. The HOA president's confidence collapsed in real time. Neighbors were starting to peek through curtains now. A couple had stepped outside. Everyone was watching. My wife picked up her range bag. Are we done here, officers? Yes, Sergeant, they said in unison. As she walked back toward me, the HOA president stood frozen, realizing that the authority she thought she wielded meant nothing in the face of reality. And this was only the beginning. Suburban HOA neighborhood at dusk, tense atmosphere, neatly trimmed lawns, American flag fluttering, cinematic wide shot. Middle-aged woman angrily pointing across the street from her porch, face red with outrage, evening light. Calm woman standing on her driveway with a legally holstered firearm, confident posture, neutral expression. Police cruiser arriving fast with flashing lights, suburban street, dramatic motion blur. Close-up of shocked HOA woman clutching her phone mid-call, disbelief on her face. Two police officers exiting patrol car, alert but composed, early evening lighting. Officer speaking calmly to armed woman, respectful distance, professional body language. HOA woman yelling and gesturing wildly at police, chaotic energy. Close-up of police officer recognizing someone, subtle surprise in eyes. Officer straightening posture in quiet respect, dramatic cinematic framing. Salute moment captured from side angle, powerful emotional tension. HOA woman frozen in silence, mouth slightly open, stunned expression. Neighbors peeking from windows and porches, curiosity and concern. Wide shot of quiet suburban street after confrontation, police lights fading. Bodycam style perspective of calm interaction, realistic documentary feel. Nightfall settling over the neighborhood, street lights glowing. HOA board member watching nervously from sidewalk, anxious expression. Close-up of legal firearm secured properly, non-threatening, responsible handling. Officer nodding respectfully while speaking, calm authority. HOA woman stepping back in defeat, shoulders slumped. Neighbors whispering together after police leave, subtle relief. Police cruiser driving away down quiet street, calm restored. Dramatic contrast shot. Calm homeowner versus furious HOA woman. Suburban home exterior lit by porch lights, cinematic shadows. Officer reviewing notes beside patrol car, professional focus. HOA woman alone on sidewalk after incident, isolated feeling. Wide aerial style shot of peaceful neighborhood after chaos. Close-up of confident woman's face, steady eyes, controlled breathing. Police officer exchanging respectful glance with colleague. HOA woman watching police leave, anger replaced by embarrassment. Neighbors nodding in silent approval toward homeowner. Cinematic slow-motion style shot of salute moment. Evening sky turning deep blue above suburban rooftop. Police radio crackling softly inside cruiser, realistic detail. HOA woman gripping phone tightly, knuckles white. Officer maintaining calm stance despite yelling nearby. Street perspective from across the road, balanced composition. Homeowner standing grounded on her property, strong presence. HOA woman stepping back onto her porch, defeated posture. Patrol lights reflecting off parked cars and windows. Quiet moment of eye contact between officer and homeowner. Neighbors emerging cautiously after police departure. Suburban calm returning, crickets and night ambience implied. HOA woman watching from behind curtains later that night. Homeowner closing front door peacefully, sense of safety. Officer writing final report under streetlight. Long shot of neighborhood street at night, total calm. Emotional contrast shot. Fear versus authority. Homeowner standing tall beside her house, night sky above. HOA woman alone under porch light, realization setting in. Final cinematic shot of peaceful street, tension fully gone. By the time the first patrol car rolled to a stop in front of our house, the entire street had gone quiet in that unnatural way only sirens can create. Doors were half open, blinds twitched, and phones were already raised, recording from behind curtains. The HOA Karen stood at the edge of her driveway with her arms folded tight, chin lifted like she was waiting to be congratulated for saving the neighborhood. My wife hadn't moved. She stood exactly where she'd been when the call was made, feet shoulder-width apart, posture relaxed, her legally owned firearm secured properly, hands visible, calm and steady. There was no panic in her eyes. No fear. Just patience. The first officer stepped out of the cruiser, hand resting near his belt, scanning the scene the way experienced cops do. His eyes went from the HOA Karen to me to my wife. And that's when I saw it, the slightest pause. Not alarm. Recognition. The second cruiser arrived moments later, then a third. The Karen's confidence visibly grew with each one. She gestured wildly toward my wife, talking fast, pointing like she was narrating a crime in progress. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. I'd heard her type before, "She's threatening everyone." I feared for my life. She shouldn't be allowed to have that. One officer approached my wife directly. "Calm. Professional." He asked her name. She answered. And the air shifted. The officer blinked once, then straightened his posture. His tone changed, not softer, not harsher, just different. Respectful in a way you can't fake. He nodded, stepped back half a pace, and spoke into his radio. That's when the HOA Karen's face started to change. She kept talking, but her voice faltered as she realized something wasn't going the way she'd planned. This wasn't turning into a dramatic takedown. No one was yelling commands. No one was drawing weapons. In fact, the officers weren't even tense anymore. Another officer walked over, glanced at my wife, and his eyebrows shot up. He smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Ma'am." Then, without a word to the Karen, he lifted his hand and saluted. It was crisp, clean, unmistakable. The street froze. The HOA Karen's mouth literally fell open. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand as her brain scrambled to catch up with reality. The narrative she'd built, that she was the hero, that my wife was the threat, collapsed in real time. She stammered, stepping forward. What are you doing?" "She has a gun." One officer finally turned to her. His expression was calm, but there was an edge to it now. The kind that says you've wasted professional time. "Ma'am," he said, "step back onto your property." "But..." "Now." She did. Instinctively. The officers gathered briefly near their cruisers, speaking in low voices. My wife remained exactly as instructed, calm and compliant, though it was clear she didn't need to be told what to do. When they returned, the officer in charge addressed the situation clearly and loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. My wife was lawfully carrying. No threats had been made. No laws had been broken. Then he turned to the Karen. "And you," he said, "made a false emergency report." Her face went red. "I was scared. Anyone would be." He shook his head. "Being uncomfortable doesn't make something illegal. And weaponizing 911 because you don't like someone? That's serious." The confidence drained out of her like a popped balloon. She tried to pivot, tried to reclaim control. "Well, the HOA." "This has nothing to do with the HOA," he cut in. "And it definitely doesn't give you authority over law enforcement or residents' rights." Neighbors were fully out on their lawns now. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone could see it. One officer quietly asked my wife if she wanted to pursue a complaint. She met his eyes and said calmly, "Not today." That might have been the moment that hurt the Karen the most. Because it meant my wife didn't need revenge. She already had dignity, authority, and the truth on her side. As the cruisers pulled away, the officers nodded once more to my wife. The Karen stood frozen on her driveway, suddenly very aware that she'd exposed herself, not as a protector of the community, but as a bully who called the cops and lost control of the story. And this wasn't over. Not even close. The fallout didn't wait for the next day. It started before the last patrol car even turned the corner. Within minutes, my phone buzzed, texts from neighbors who'd watched the whole thing unfold. Some were shocked, some apologetic. A few were quietly thrilled that someone had finally stood up to the HOA Karen and lived to tell the tale. But one notification mattered more than the rest. An email marked urgent from the HOA board. Apparently, when the police left, the Karen didn't retreat inside to reflect. She marched straight to the emergency HOA group chat and began spinning the story at warp speed. According to her, my wife had intimidated the neighborhood, the police had been unprofessional, and the HOA was now legally exposed unless action was taken immediately. She demanded fines, sanctions, and an emergency meeting. She even floated the phrase, forced compliance. That was her mistake, because unlike her, the board had seen the police report already. By that evening, the official incident log had been uploaded to the HOA's shared portal. 3 pages. Clear language. No ambiguity. It stated that my wife was lawfully carrying, fully compliant, and posed no threat. It also stated, very plainly, that the 911 call was unnecessary and bordered on false reporting. The Karen's name was right there. Suddenly, the tone of the HOA thread shifted. Questions started appearing. Quiet ones at first, then sharper. Why had she called the police without contacting anyone else? Why had she told dispatch there was an active danger? Why had officers corrected her on scene? She responded the only way she knew how. Louder, angrier, more accusatory. She blamed fear. She blamed current events. She blamed people bringing weapons into peaceful communities. She even implied, without saying it outright, that my wife's background made her suspicious. That message didn't last long. Another board member deleted it and issued a warning about discriminatory language. Then the treasurer chimed in with a financial concern. False emergency calls could expose the HOA to liability if tied to official action. That's when the Karen panicked. She showed up at our door just after sunset. Not to apologize. To intimidate. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, voice tight, telling us that the HOA would remember this, that things could get difficult, and that maybe we should think about how we want to be perceived. My wife listened quietly. Then she said something so calm, so devastating, that I almost felt bad watching the Karen absorb it. "You're on camera," my wife said. "And you should probably leave." The Karen looked up. Our doorbell cam blinked red. So did the 2 security cameras mounted under the eave. And the neighbor across the street? Filming openly now, phone held at chest height. The Karen left without another word. The emergency HOA meeting happened the next night. Attendance was the highest it had ever been. People who hadn't shown up in years logged in. Some turned on their cameras. Some didn't, but everyone listened. The Karen tried to control the floor. She demanded to speak first. The board chair allowed it. She launched into a speech about safety, fear, responsibility, and how certain behaviors didn't belong in family communities. She avoided specifics. She avoided names. She avoided the police report entirely. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then the board chair spoke. He read directly from the incident report. He clarified state law. He confirmed that the HOA had no authority over lawful firearm possession. And then, very carefully, he addressed the 911 call. He explained that using emergency services to harass or intimidate neighbors could result in criminal charges. He explained that the HOA could not, and would not, defend individual board members who acted outside their authority. Then he said the words the Karen never expected to hear. Effective immediately, you are removed from any enforcement or communications role pending review. The Karen exploded. She shouted. She accused. She threatened lawsuits. She claimed everyone was against her. But the more she spoke, the worse it got. Screens filled with shaking heads. One neighbor finally unmuted and said what everyone else had been thinking. "You called the cops on the wrong person." Silence followed. By the end of the meeting, a vote was scheduled to remove her from the board entirely. The next morning, a certified letter arrived at her house. So did another, from the city, regarding misuse of emergency services. She stopped looking our way after that. No more notes. No more glares. No more authority. Just a woman standing on her driveway, realizing that power only works when people believe in it. And belief, once broken, doesn't come back. But the story still wasn't finished. Because what happened next didn't just change her standing in the HOA. Changed the entire neighborhood. The fallout didn't end with the police leaving that night. It started there. By morning, the HOA board was in full damage control mode. Emails flooded inboxes with subject lines like clarification of incident and community safety statement. They tried to spin what happened into a misunderstanding, claiming their board member had acted out of concern. But the neighbors weren't buying it. Too many people had seen the truth with their own eyes. A grown woman weaponizing fear, calling armed officers on a law-abiding homeowner, and getting shut down instantly. What really shattered the board was the body cam footage. Within days, clips leaked through a public records request. It showed my wife standing calm, hands visible, posture disciplined. It showed the HOA Karen hysterical, shouting over officers, demanding arrest. And then it showed the moment that changed everything. The officer recognizing my wife, straightening his posture, and offering a quiet salute. No yelling. No commands. Just professional respect. Once that footage circulated in the neighborhood group chat, the power balance collapsed overnight. The HOA Karen went silent. Her Facebook posts stopped. Her daily patrol walks vanished. And the board suddenly postponed its next meeting, indefinitely. One member quietly resigned. Another stopped answering calls. The president, the same man who had backed every complaint she'd ever filed, sent a carefully worded message apologizing for recent overreach. That apology wasn't for us. It was for their own legal survival. Because attorneys started circling. A civil rights lawyer contacted us first, explaining exactly how dangerous a false police report involving a firearm could have been, not just emotionally, but legally. Another lawyer followed, outlining harassment patterns and selective enforcement. Even neighbors began submitting written statements about prior intimidation, fines, and threats they'd been too afraid to challenge before. Fear works until it doesn't. The HOA had ruled through intimidation for years, banking on the assumption that no one would push back. That assumption died in 42 seconds. By the end of the month, the board called an emergency vote to restructure leadership. Translation: remove anyone connected to the incident before lawyers made it worse. The Karen's name was quietly scrubbed from the website. Her community safety role vanished without announcement. She didn't attend meetings anymore, and when she did leave her house, she avoided eye contact with everyone. As for us, life went back to normal, but with a difference. Neighbors waved more. Conversations felt lighter. People who'd never spoken up before thanked us privately, admitting they'd been scared for years. One older couple said they'd almost sold their home because of the harassment. Another family said they finally felt safe letting their kids play outside again. That was the real victory. Not humiliation. Not revenge. Accountability. The lesson wasn't about guns, or badges, or power. It was about knowing your rights, and not letting bullies redefine them. The HOA Karen thought authority came from rules she made up in her head. The police knew better. And once the illusion cracked, it couldn't be repaired. Now when people ask what happened that night, I tell them the truth. She tried to control the neighborhood with fear. She called the cops expecting backup. And instead, she learned what real authority looks like. Sometimes the loudest people crumble the fastest, especially when the spotlight turns on them.